Cold-hearted billionaire Playboy falls for his maid, a love he never saw coming. $50,000. That is what he offered her. One weekend, no strings attached. He stood there in his $3,000 shirt, cologne worth more than her monthly salary, with that smile that had melted 100 women before her. He expected the usual reaction, the blush, the stammer, the eventual yes that always came. But Celeste Drummond did something no woman had ever done to Sebastian Mercer. She laughed, not a flattered laugh, not a nervous giggle, a laugh that cut through his arrogance like a blade through silk. And then she looked him dead in the eyes, this billionaire who owned ships and skyscrapers and the attention of every socialite in California, and she said words that would haunt him for weeks. Let me be clear, Mr. Mercer. I do not care about your billions. I do not want your trips or your shallow propositions. If working in your estate means tolerating this kind of disrespect, I will have my resignation on your desk by morning. And just like that, she turned and walked away. Did not look back. Did not hesitate. Left him standing there in his mother's botanical library, surrounded by rare plants and rarer silence, feeling something he had not felt in decades. Small. Have you ever met someone so confident in their worth that no amount of money could shake them? Someone who looked past your titles and your achievements and saw straight through to who you really were? That is the kind of woman Celeste Drummond was. And Sebastian Mercer, the coldest heart on the California coast, was about to discover that the one thing his money could not buy was the only thing worth having. But what happens when that rejection does not push him away? What happens when it pulls him closer? When the man who has never been told no becomes obsessed with earning a yes he actually deserves? This is a story about transformation, about a man who thought he had everything discovering he had nothing that mattered, about a woman who refused to be impressed by wealth and ended up teaching a billionaire how to feel, and about a love so unexpected, so hard-won, that it changed 2 lives forever. To understand how that moment in the library came to be, we need to go back to the beginning, to the cliffs of Monterey Bay, to a glass mansion that breathed money but exhaled loneliness, to a man who was about to meet his match in the most unlikely place. The Pacific wind swept across the cliffs of Monterey Bay with the kind of force that reminded you nature answered to no one. Perched upon those ancient stones sat the Mercer estate, a sprawling fortress of glass and reclaimed timber where crashing waves met modern elegance in a display of wealth so effortless it almost seemed natural. The house stretched across the clifftop like it belonged there. Infinity pools melted into the ocean horizon. Japanese maples lined the serpentine driveway in perfect symmetry. Inside, everything gleamed with the quiet confidence of money that never had to announce itself. But for all its beauty, there was something cold about the Mercer estate. The hallways echoed. The rooms sat empty more often than not. The staff moved like shadows, trained to be invisible, to serve without being seen. It was less a home than a monument, a trophy case for a man who collected achievements the way other people collected memories. Sebastian Mercer had built this place 5 years ago, right after his 30th birthday, right after his company crossed the billion-dollar threshold. He had wanted something that matched his ambition, something that told the world exactly who he was. Looking back, he would realize the house told the truth more clearly than he ever intended. Sebastian Mercer was, by every measurable standard, a success. At 35, he commanded a shipping empire that stretched across 3 continents. His grandfather had started with a single rusted cargo vessel running supplies along the California coast. His father had expanded modestly, adding a few more ships, a small warehouse, nothing remarkable. But Sebastian had transformed that modest fleet into a global logistics dynasty worth billions. He had done it through ruthlessness, through a mind that calculated angles others could not see, through a willingness to work 18-hour days and sacrifice everything that did not serve his ambition. By 28, he had tripled the company's value. By 32, he had made the cover of Forbes. By 35, he had everything a man could want. And he had never felt emptier. Not that anyone could tell from the outside. Sebastian Mercer was the kind of man who turned heads without trying. Chiseled features that belonged on magazine covers. Storm gray eyes that could negotiate a merger or seduce a stranger with equal precision. A jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and a smile that promised things he rarely delivered. Women dreamed about him. Men envied him. Society forgave him every indiscretion because his charm was as endless as his bank account. He did not believe in weakness. He certainly did not believe in love. To Sebastian, Love was a transaction like everything else. You offered something, you received something, and when the exchange no longer benefited you, you moved on. Simple, clean, efficient. He collected women the way other men collected art. Briefly admired, never kept long enough to form attachment. There was always another gala, another model, another socialite willing to overlook his reputation for a taste of his lifestyle. He told himself this was freedom. He told himself this was winning. He never asked himself why the victories felt so hollow. It was a Thursday evening in late September when everything changed. Sebastian was not supposed to be home. He was supposed to be in Tokyo, finalizing a merger that would make him the youngest billionaire to control Pacific trade routes. The meetings had gone well. The deal was done. His team had planned a celebration at some exclusive club in Shibuya, complete with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a month. But at the last minute, Sebastian had canceled, claimed exhaustion, caught a red-eye back to California, let the private jet carry him home to his empty mansion while his executives partied without him. The truth was something he would not admit even to himself. An inexplicable restlessness had taken root somewhere beneath his ribs, a hollow ache that champagne could not touch. He had stood in that Tokyo boardroom, watching men shake his hand and congratulate his genius, and felt absolutely nothing. So he came home. To what? He was not sure. But the restlessness demanded movement, and movement brought him to the lower terrace at dusk, whiskey in hand, watching the Pacific swallow the sun. That is when he saw her. She was kneeling in the rose beds just beyond the garden archway, her hands buried in dark soil, her body angled away from him, completely unaware of his presence. She wore faded denim overalls and a white tank top smudged with earth. Her hair, deep auburn with natural waves that caught the dying light like copper thread, was pulled back in a loose braid that had begun to unravel. Wireless earbuds peeked from beneath her hair. Her lips moved silently, forming words to music only she could hear. And as she worked, as her hands moved through the soil with practiced grace, her whole body seemed to sway to some invisible rhythm. Sebastian blinked, then stared. She was beautiful, but not the kind of beautiful he was used to. Not the airbrushed, surgically enhanced, designer-dressed beauty that populated his yachts and galas. This was something raw, something that made his breath catch in a way it had not in years. Her skin was sun-kissed and real. Her figure was strong, capable, shaped by work rather than trainers. She moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable in her own skin. She paused to wipe her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. And then she laughed, a soft, genuine sound that carried across the evening air. She was laughing at herself, at the smudge she could probably feel, at some private joke between her and the roses. Something stirred in Sebastian, something unfamiliar and uncomfortable. He watched her for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, watched the way the golden light painted her profile, watched the way she handled each plant with care, like it mattered, like she was doing something meaningful, watched until she stood, stretched her back, gathered her tools, and disappeared around the corner of the greenhouse without ever knowing he was there. Sebastian stood frozen on the terrace, whiskey warming in his forgotten hand. Who was she? The next morning, he asked his estate manager. Her name was Celeste Drummond, 27 years old, the live-in groundskeeper and caretaker hired 6 months ago while Sebastian was expanding operations in Singapore. She was exceptional, the manager said. Punctual, dedicated, had transformed the gardens in ways the previous 3 groundskeepers never managed. She was also working toward a degree in environmental restoration, taking online classes between shifts, studying late into the night in the small cottage at the edge of the property. She keeps to herself, the manager added. Professional, focused, not the type to be impressed by status, if you understand my meaning, sir. Sebastian understood perfectly. And of course, that only made him want her more. By the end of the week, Sebastian Mercer had found countless excuses to be wherever Celeste Drummond happened to work. He intercepted her by the greenhouse one morning, admiring the orchids she had cultivated from struggling seedlings into magnificent blooms. "You have talented hands," he said, dropping his voice to that register that usually made women melt. She glanced up from her work, expression neutral. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. The humid conditions help." He tried again by the infinity pool, where she was trimming the sculptural hedges that lined the terrace. "Most people take breaks during sunset," he observed, leaning against a marble pillar with practiced casualness. "The view from here is worth stopping for." I am sure it is, she replied, never pausing her shears. But I have work to finish. He found her in the wine cellar one evening, helping the house manager with inventory. You know, he said, swirling a glass of 1982 Bordeaux, I could teach you about wine. Consider it a perk of the job. She looked at him then, really looked, and something flickered in her hazel eyes. Amusement, maybe, or something closer to pity. I prefer water, she said simply. It does not cloud judgment. She returned to her clipboard, and Sebastian stood there with his expensive wine and his expensive smile, feeling like a fool for the first time in memory. This was new. Women did not dismiss Sebastian Mercer. They did not offer polite nods and return to their work like he was an interruption rather than a prize. They did not look at him with that quiet knowing in their eyes, like they could see straight through his charm to something hollow beneath. He should have been offended, should have moved on, found someone easier, someone who understood the game. But Celeste's indifference did something unexpected to him. It made him curious, not about conquering her, about understanding her, about why she seemed so complete when he, with all his billions, felt so fundamentally incomplete. Now before we continue with what happens next, and trust me, this is where everything changes. If you are enjoying this story, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Andy Love Stories. We bring you incredible tales of love, redemption, and transformation every week. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had someone completely misjudge your worth? Let me know. I read every single comment. Now, back to Sebastian and his biggest mistake. The afternoon it happened was thick with coastal humidity. Fog rolled in from the Pacific, wrapping the estate in gray gauze, muting the usual sounds of waves and wind. The house felt quieter than normal. Most of the staff had retreated to their quarters. Sebastian wandered the halls with that restlessness still gnawing at him, that unnamed hunger that grew sharper every time he caught a glimpse of auburn hair disappearing around a corner. He found her in the botanical library. It was a glass-walled room on the estate's eastern wing, filled with rare plants his mother had collected during her brief life. Ferns from New Zealand, orchids from Thailand, succulents from the Canary Islands. Sebastian rarely entered this room. It reminded him too much of her, of the woman who had died when he was 8, leaving him to navigate a world that suddenly made no sense. But today, drawn by something he could not name, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. Celeste was there. She knelt before an antique fern, the same species his mother had prized above all others. Her hands moved with careful precision as she repotted the delicate roots, transferring them to fresh soil with the tenderness one might show a sleeping child. Green gold light filtered through the glass walls, painting her in shades of forest and honey. She did not notice him. Her earbuds were in, her focus complete. Sebastian leaned against the doorway and watched. Minutes passed. He studied the way her fingers moved through dirt like it was sacred, the way her lips pressed together in concentration, the way she handled his mother's plant with more care than he had shown anything in years. Something cracked inside him, something he could not identify. Finally, he spoke. I have been thinking about you. Celeste paused, removed one earbud, looked up at him with those hazel eyes that seemed to see everything. Is that so? She said. Not a question, a statement. Sebastian stepped forward, summoning his usual confidence, the cologne and charm that had never failed him. You fascinate me. You are different from anyone I have met. And I was wondering. He paused, running calculations in his head. What would impress her? What would break through that wall? If I offered you $50,000, would you spend a weekend with me in Paris? The silence that followed was deafening. Celeste set down the pot she was holding with deliberate care. She did not stand, did not raise her voice, did not give him the satisfaction of visible anger. Instead, she simply looked at him, and in that look Sebastian saw something worse than fury. Disappointment. Excuse me, she said quietly. I am serious, Sebastian continued, suddenly nervous, though he could not say why. No strings attached. We could enjoy each other as company. You could use the money for your studies, your projects, whatever you want. Win-win. She rose slowly, brushed dirt from her knees, met his eyes with an expression so controlled it was terrifying. Is that how you see me? She asked. A transaction? A service you can purchase? Sebastian faltered. I did not mean it like. Yes, you did. Her voice cut through his excuse like a blade. She stepped closer, and despite being half a foot shorter than him, she suddenly seemed to fill the entire room. Let me be clear, Mr. Mercer. I do not care about your billions. I do not want your trips to Paris or your shallow propositions. I came here to work, to earn an honest living, to build something of my own. I have goals. I have standards. And if working in your estate means tolerating this kind of disrespect—" She paused, and something flickered across her face. Not anger, weariness. The weariness of a woman who had encountered this before and survived it before and would survive it again if she had to. "I will have my resignation on your desk by morning." She walked past him without waiting for a response. Her shoulder brushed his as she passed, a whisper of contact that felt like a brand. She did not look back, did not hesitate, just walked out into the fog and disappeared. Sebastian stood frozen in the green-gold light, surrounded by his mother's plants, feeling smaller than he had felt since he was 8 years old, watching them lower her casket into the ground. No woman had ever rejected him before. Not once. Not like this. He had been turned down, sure, in the performative way that meant try harder, offer more. But this was different. This was final. Celeste had not played a game. She had not bargained for better terms. She had simply looked at him, measured him against her standards, and found him completely lacking. And the worst part, she was right. That night, Sebastian could not sleep. He paced the empty halls of his mansion, passing the doors to rooms no one ever used, walking beneath chandeliers that illuminated nothing but silence. He poured himself whiskey after whiskey, but the burn in his throat could not match the burn in his chest. He kept replaying her words, her face, the way she had looked at him like he was not a billionaire or a genius or a prize to be won, but simply a man, a small, hollow man who thought he could purchase everything he wanted because he had never wanted anything that mattered. Around 3 in the morning, he found himself standing in the botanical library again, alone, surrounded by plants that had outlived his mother by almost 3 decades. He looked at the fern Celeste had been repotting, now sitting in its new home, roots protected, leaves reaching toward the glass ceiling. She had cared for it with such tenderness, such patience. When had anyone last cared for anything in this house? When had he? Sebastian sank into a chair and put his head in his hands. He did not cry. He had not cried since he was 8, but something inside him finally cracked all the way open, and in that crack, light began to seep through. The days that followed were unbearable in ways Sebastian had not anticipated. Celeste did not resign. She stayed, professional as ever, appearing at dawn to tend the gardens and disappearing by dusk to her cottage. She never sought him out, never acknowledged what had happened in the library. She moved through her duties with quiet competence, always just beyond his reach, close enough to see but far enough to remind him of the distance he had created. He watched her from windows, saw her pruning the wisteria as morning fog burned off, saw the other staff gravitating toward her during breaks, their faces lighting up at something she said, heard her humming old jazz standards while she worked in the vegetable garden at dawn, her voice carrying through the salt air like a gift. He realized with growing horror that he missed her, not her attention. He could buy attention anywhere. He missed her, the specific curve of her smile, the way she moved through the world like she belonged in it, the way she had made him feel seen rather than admired, if only for those brief moments before he ruined everything. One afternoon he found her cleaning the stone fire pit on the lower deck. Autumn had arrived, and the estate needed preparing for cooler months. She was scrubbing ash from the stones with focused determination, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up. Sebastian approached slowly, sat on the stone ledge nearby without asking permission. "I owe you an apology," he said. She did not look up. "For what?" "For disrespecting you. For assuming you had a price. For being arrogant and out of line." Her hands paused briefly on the stones, then resumed their scrubbing. "Why are you really talking to me, Mr. Mercer?" Sebastian exhaled, looked out at the Pacific, gray and churning under cloudy skies. "Because I have not stopped thinking about that day, not in the way you probably assume. I keep replaying what you said, and I keep wondering." He paused, struggling with words that did not come naturally. "I keep wondering why I am the way I am, and for the first time, I do not like the answer." Celeste stopped scrubbing, sat back on her heels, finally looked at him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the performance, looking for the angle. But Sebastian was not performing. For the first time in years, he was simply sitting with the truth of who he was, and it was unbearable. "Maybe it is because you never had to change," she said quietly. Money insulates people from consequences. When everyone says yes, you never learn to hear no. He smiled bitterly. That is part of it. She waited, not pushing, just present. And somehow that patience unlocked something in him. My mother died when I was 8, he said. The words felt strange in his mouth, like a language he had forgotten. She was the only person who ever saw me as more than an heir, more than a piece of the Mercer legacy. When she was gone, he swallowed, continued. My father did not know how to grieve. He buried himself in work, in women, in distractions. I was raised by housekeepers and tutors, people who were paid to tolerate me, not love me. Celeste's expression shifted, not to pity, something deeper, understanding. I thought being desired was the same as being loved, Sebastian admitted. I thought if enough people wanted me, I would eventually feel whole. And did you? She asked gently. No. He looked at his hands, the hands that had built an empire and held nothing that mattered. I just felt emptier. The waves crashed below. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt and change. Celeste sat in the silence with him, not trying to fill it, not trying to fix it. Just being there. Maybe it is time, she said finally, to learn a different way. The words landed like seeds in fertile soil. Something unlocked that day. A door that had been sealed so long Sebastian had forgotten it existed. He started doing things that baffled his staff. Help carry supplies from delivery trucks. Sat with Celeste during her lunch breaks asking about her classes, her childhood in coastal Oregon, her mother's garden that had first taught her to love growing things. He listened without interrupting, asked questions without ulterior motives, found himself genuinely interested in her answers. She told him about her father's fishing accident when she was 19, the sudden loss that upended everything, the mountain of medical debt that had derailed her education for years. The night she worked double shifts at diners and gas stations and anywhere else that would have her, sending every spare dollar to her mother, putting her dreams on hold for survival. She told him about finding peace in soil and seasons, about the way plants taught patience, the way gardens rewarded consistency over brilliance, about deciding to become a groundskeeper because it let her do what she loved while studying for the career she dreamed of. Sebastian listened, really listened, and somewhere in those conversations, he began to see the world through different eyes. One afternoon, she found him attempting to prune a rosebush, badly. He had watched videos on his phone, read articles, thought he understood the theory, but practice was proving humbling. You are murdering it, she said, appearing beside him with a smile she could not quite hide. I am trying, he protested. Try softer. She took the shears from his hands, showed him how to identify the growth nodes, how to angle the cut so water would drain properly, how to feel for the health of the branch before deciding where to trim. Her hands guided his. Her voice was patient. Her closeness smelled like soil and sunshine, and something floral he could not name. Why are you helping me? He asked quietly. After everything, she considered the question. Because people deserve second chances, even billionaires. We are getting to the moment that almost destroyed everything. But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And if this story is touching your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Now, let me tell you about the storm that nearly tore them apart. The connection between them grew slowly, like the garden Celeste tended. There were setbacks and awkward moments and days when Sebastian fell into old patterns and had to catch himself. But there was also progress, real progress. Morning coffees on the terrace became ritual. He would bring 2 cups from the kitchen, one black for him, one with cream and honey for her, and they would sit watching the sunrise while the rest of the estate slept. They talked about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, dreams for the future. The conversations had no agenda, no angle, no performance. They were simply 2 people learning each other. One evening, Sebastian confessed something he had never told anyone. I started seeing a therapist, he said. They were walking the cliff path at dusk, watching seabirds wheel against the painted sky. After what you said in the garden, about learning a different way, I thought maybe I should try. Celeste stopped walking, looked at him with something new in her eyes. That takes courage, she said. Does it? He laughed softly. It feels like admitting weakness. Vulnerability is not weakness. Her voice was firm. It is the only path to real connection. The therapist said I confused desire with validation, Sebastian continued. That I crave approval because I never mourned my mother properly. That I use charm like armor because I am terrified of being truly known. Is that true? Most days, yes. Celeste reached out. Her fingers brushed his wrist. The touch was light, fleeting, but it sent electricity through him. Then keep going, she said. Keep doing the work. That is what matters. The autumn storms came without warning. Relentless rain battered the coast for days. Wind howled through the estate, knocking out power, transforming the mansion into a candlelit maze. Staff huddled in the main house, waiting for the weather to break. Sebastian found Celeste in the conservatory one evening. She had claimed a corner near the tall palms, reading by flashlight while thunder shook the glass walls around her. "You are not afraid of storms?" he asked, sitting beside her on the wicker settee. "I grew up on the Oregon coast," she said, setting down her book. "Storms are just the sky being honest." Lightning illuminated the room, casting her features in silver for a heartbeat before fading. "Can I tell you something?" Sebastian asked. "Always. Being around you makes me want to tell the truth. And that terrifies me." She turned to face him. The candlelight flickered between them. "Why?" "Because the truth is that I have spent my entire adult life running from who I really am, hiding behind money and success and women who never ask me real questions. I do not know who I am without the performance." Her hand found his in the darkness, held it. "Then maybe it is time to find out." The next morning, Sebastian descended the stairs to find Veronica Kane draped across his leather sofa. A model. An ex-lover. A reminder of the man he'd been trying to bury. She was sipping champagne despite the early hour, her long legs crossed, her smile sharp as glass. "Darling," she purred, "I heard you have become a hermit. Thought I would rescue you." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "You should not be here. Don't be dramatic." She rose, approaching him with practiced seduction. "We had fun. We could have fun again. I am not interested." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Is it true, then? The rumors about your little gardener?" At that moment, Celeste appeared in the doorway. She was carrying a basket of fresh herbs for the kitchen, her hair still damp from morning mist. She took in the scene with quiet assessment. Veronica on one side, Sebastian on the other, the tension crackling between them. Veronica looked her over with undisguised disdain. "This is your replacement? A woman with dirt under her nails?" Sebastian stepped forward, positioning himself between them, without thinking. "Leave. Now. You are throwing away everything for this?" "I am throwing away nothing," Sebastian said, his voice steady and certain. "I am finally finding something real." Veronica's face contorted with wounded pride. She snatched her purse, threw one last venomous look at Celeste, and stormed out. The front door slammed behind her like a gunshot. Silence settled over the room. Sebastian turned to Celeste. "I am sorry you saw that." But Celeste was not upset. She was looking at him differently, with something in her eyes that might have been the beginning of trust. "You meant what you said. Every word." Their love bloomed like the gardens she tended. Slowly, deliberately, with patience and care. Sebastian completed his therapy, stopped attending galas that felt hollow, invested in Celeste's environmental restoration projects, not as a gift, but as a business partner who believed in her vision. He sat through her online classes with her, helped her study for exams, celebrated her small victories like they were his own. She taught him about plants, about patience, about the satisfaction of building something with your hands instead of your wallet. She pushed him when he retreated into old habits, forgave him when he stumbled, believed in the man he was becoming even when he doubted himself. One evening on the cliff's edge, watching the sun melt into the Pacific, Sebastian turned to her. "I have never felt this way about anyone." She smiled. "What way?" "Like I want to be better tomorrow than I was today. Because of you." The kiss that followed was soft, earned, meaningful. Not passion born of conquest, but intimacy born of trust. When they finally pulled apart, the stars had emerged above them, and the world felt different somehow. Bigger, brighter, full of possibility. What happens next is the moment you have been waiting for. But first, if this story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to believe in love today. Comment below with your favorite part so far, and make sure you are subscribed because we have an incredible ending coming up. A warm April evening. The air smelled of jasmine and salt. Sebastian had asked her for a formal date, their first real one. "Dress up," he said. "Be ready at 7. Celeste emerged from her cottage wearing a wine-colored silk dress that caught the fading light. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Why tonight?" she asked. "What is different?" Sebastian smiled and offered his hand. He led her down a path she had never seen, carved through the meadow toward the cliff's edge. As they walked, she realized the path was lined with luminaries, small candles in glass jars, each surrounded by flowers she had planted herself over the past year. The path opened onto a promontory overlooking the Pacific. A string quartet played softly near the ancient cypress tree, where they had shared their first real conversation. Fairy lights wove through the branches. A table for two stood at the cliff's edge, set with white linens and roses. Celeste's breath caught. Sebastian led her to the edge, where the ocean stretched infinite before them. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and rose. He turned to face her, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the dying light. "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone," he began, voice steady despite the emotion beneath. "I built walls so high, I could not remember why I had started building them. Then you came along, stubborn, brilliant, infuriating, and you refused to be impressed by anything except who I actually was." Celeste's eyes glistened. "You taught me that love is not a transaction," Sebastian continued. "It is not about what someone can give you. It is about who you become when you are with them. You made me want to be better, not for you, but because of you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a velvet box, knelt before her on the cliff's edge while the Pacific roared below and the stars began to emerge above. The ring inside was hammered gold, set with an ocean blue sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds like sea foam. Simple, meaningful. "Her, Celeste Drummond," he said. "Will you spend your life helping me grow?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her smile outshone them all. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, rose, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her while the string quartet swelled and the staff, watching from the mansion windows, burst into silent applause. He had spent years collecting things: ships, companies, women who said yes too easily. But this was the first thing he had ever truly earned, and it was worth more than every billion in his accounts. The wedding took place on a perfect October afternoon when the Japanese maples blazed with color and the Pacific sparkled like scattered diamonds. They held it on the estate grounds, beneath an archway of driftwood and roses that Celeste had designed herself. She walked down an aisle carpeted with wildflowers she had cultivated over the past year. Her gown was simple ivory silk that moved like water. Her auburn curls fell naturally around her shoulders, crowned with a simple veil. Around her bouquet hung her father's old compass on a ribbon, a piece of home carried into her future. Sebastian waited at the altar. Navy suit, no pretension. Tears already streaming down his face without shame. The man who had once hidden behind charm and confidence now stood bare and honest before everyone who had ever known him, letting them see exactly who he had become. Their vows were simple but devastating. "I thought I had everything," Sebastian said, voice breaking. "Until you showed me I had nothing that mattered. You did not try to fix me. You simply showed me what was worth becoming. I promised to spend every day earning the way you look at me right now." "I thought love required perfection," Celeste replied. "I built walls, expecting everyone to fail the test. But you taught me that love is not about finding someone without flaws. It is about finding someone who keeps trying. I promise to grow alongside you, always." They kissed as the Pacific crashed below and the guests wept openly. The string quartet swelled. Flower petals fell like colored snow, and two souls who had found each other against every odd finally made it official. The reception lasted until stars filled the sky. They danced beneath fairy lights while their guests celebrated around them. His former critics, the socialites who had whispered about his fall from grace, now stood silent and impressed. Her mother, flown in from Oregon, cried happy tears throughout the night. When the last guest had gone, Sebastian pulled Celeste close on the empty dance floor. "Any regrets?" he asked. She smiled against his chest. "Only that I did not slap you harder that first day." They both laughed, and in that laughter was everything. The past they had overcome, the future they would build, the love that had transformed them both. The honeymoon spanned continents and weeks, Santorini's blue domes and white cliffs, Kyoto's bamboo forests and temple gardens, New Zealand's starlit skies and mountain lakes. But their favorite moments were the quiet ones. sharing coffee at dawn in rented villas, dancing barefoot on balconies, planning the restoration projects they would build together. He never brought his phone. She never looked back. On their final morning abroad, at a cliffside resort overlooking the Tasman Sea, Sebastian woke to find Celeste sitting on their balcony. The sunrise painted her in gold. She was holding a small white box in her hands. "What is this?" he asked, settling beside her. She turned to him with tears in her eyes. Opened the box slowly. Inside lay 2 impossibly small knitted booties. His heart stopped. "Are you 8 weeks?" she whispered. "I wanted to tell you somewhere beautiful." He pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying simultaneously, overwhelmed by joy he had never known existed. "Everything started with you," he murmured against her hair. "Everything good." 1 year later, the Mercer estate had transformed. Not the architecture or the gardens, though those had flourished under Celeste's care. The transformation was something deeper, something you could feel the moment you passed through the gates. The hallways no longer echoed with emptiness. They echoed with warmth, with laughter, with the small sounds of a home actually being lived in, baby toys scattered across the terrace, family photos on walls that had once held only expensive art, the smell of fresh baking drifting from a kitchen that was always warm. Sebastian sat on the terrace in the golden afternoon light, his daughter cradled against his chest. Aurora Mercer was 6 months old. She had her mother's wild auburn curls and her father's storm-gray eyes, a perfect fusion of 2 souls who had found each other against every odd. Celeste appeared beside him, settling into her favorite chair with a cup of tea. She looked out at the gardens she had transformed, at the ocean that had witnessed their entire journey. "I used to think legacy meant money," Sebastian murmured, watching Aurora's tiny fingers curl around his thumb. "Buildings with my name on them, headlines that would outlive me. And now," Celeste asked softly. He looked up at her. This woman who had refused his money, challenged his arrogance, slowly, patiently taught him what it meant to be truly alive. "Now I know it is about love, the kind that changes you, the kind that makes you want to deserve it." Celeste leaned over and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "Welcome home, Mr. Mercer." The Pacific wind swept across the cliffs of Monterey Bay, carrying not secrets anymore, but promises. And in the sprawling glass house that had once echoed with emptiness, a family finally took root. Sebastian Mercer had spent 35 years collecting things that could not fill the emptiness inside him. Ships, companies, women who never challenged him. Achievements that meant nothing once the applause faded. He had built walls so high he could not see over them, then wondered why he felt so alone. But one woman changed everything. One stubborn, brilliant, infuriating woman with dirt under her nails and fire in her eyes. She had looked at his billions and seen nothing worth wanting. She had looked at him and seen everything worth becoming. Love does not come to those who demand it. It comes to those brave enough to change for it. Thank you so much for watching this story to the very end. If Celeste and Sebastian's journey touched your heart, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to believe in transformation today. Subscribe to Mr. Andy Love Stories and hit that notification bell. We bring you incredible tales of love, redemption, and hope every single week. I want to hear from you. What moment in this story moved you the most? Was it the rejection, the transformation, the proposal? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Remember, it is never too late to become who you were meant to be. Love is patient. Love transforms. And sometimes, the person who saves your heart is the one you never expected. Until next time, keep believing in love.